my channel, or welcome back to my channel. My name is Andy, sometimes Mouse, and I talk about books and book-related things, and today I am giving you my February wrap-up. And I'm actually filming this on the second to last day of the month, so this is, in fact, the wrap-up. Like, it is, these are all the books. I'm done with any book I'm going to finish for this month, so congrats to me for filming this on time. Let's go ahead and get into the stats. February was a pretty solid, I said that, now I'm going to ramble a little bit more about February. February was a pretty solid month. I read more than I expected to read. I had a lot of really good books and then some not so good books. I had some fun rereads. I had a video where I just read recommendations from my friends, which was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that a lot. It was a good month, better than expected for sure. I read a lot of horror, I feel like. Maybe I'm wrong. No, I read a lot of horror. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into the stats though. I read a total of 28 books. For pages read, that was 5,235 pages. For audio hours listened, it was 94 hours, 58 minutes, and 6 seconds, which again, and I've disclaimed this many times, I listen to my audiobooks between 2 and 3 times speed, so as that time as days is 3 days, 22 hours, and 58 minutes. My average page per day was 119 pages and 119.7, and my average hours listened per day was 6 hours, 26 minutes, and 43 seconds. And also, I feel like I should clarify that it's not average pages per day. It's, I mean, it is average pages per day, but it's also like how many pages I was reading per day to finish a book. That's how that stat comes about. I don't know if that makes sense, but that information might be helpful to you. My average rating was a 3.6. It's higher than last month's average rating. I was kind of surprised that it didn't end up lower, honestly, because some of the books, the books I disliked this month, I very much disliked this month. It wasn't like oh, it's a 3-star, no, they were 1 and 2 stars. Like, if I disliked it, I very much disliked it. Down to like even nonfiction books that I was just like, I don't enjoy this, I don't feel like this is well written, whatever. So I purchased a total of 2 books, which the total spending was $26.98. I have spent less than $100 on books this year so far. I expect to maintain that. I checked out a total of 14 library books. I reread 10 books. The books that I read this month, their formats were 8 audiobooks, 16 ebooks, and 4 physical books. And the intended audience for those books is 20 of them were adult books, 6 of them were young adult books, and 2 of them were middle grade or children's books. And then onto the genre breakdown usually for my book blanket. I will have a book blanket update, not for a little bit. I think it will probably come out in May. So it's a couple of months away, but I should have a book blanket update coming up. I'm very excited. I've been enjoying it a lot, and the variety of genres I've been reading recently has really brought in some interesting factors here. I read a total of 3 sci-fi books, 5 fantasy books, 2 romance, no historical, I don't know why I even have historical here, 6 thriller, 6 horror, 1 classic, 4 general nonfiction, and 1 contemporary book. So again, it was a pretty varied list of genres this month, and I'm quite pleased with that. I think that next month is going to be pretty young adult heavy and contemporary heavy based on what I'm reading specifically, so we will see how next month goes, but this is, I'm glad with the variety that I had for this month. With the stats out of the way, we're going to talk about my favorite part, which is my top and bottom books of the month. Now, I do have only 2 top books of the month. I read a bunch of decent books this month, but only 2 of them ended up being like what I consider absolute top tier books. And then I read a few not so great books, but only 1 of them I considered like, I highly recommend that no one actually reads this book, which is really disappointing. And we'll get into why when I get to it. Let's talk about my top books this month. First up, we have Naughty Been Bones by Rebecca Schaeffer. This was recommended to me by Lexi, which was really exciting. I'm sure Lexi's like, well, I win all the prizes because this got on my top books list. It was a really fun young adult. I feel like I haven't read a really fun young adult, fun in a really dark dark way. A fun young adult book where I'm interested in continuing and reading the series in quite a while, because I don't know, I've been focusing a lot on adult books, obviously, but I also I feel like the reason I've been focusing so much on adult books is because young adult books just haven't been doing it for me, and I think that this one really just like hit the sweet spot. This was a really fantastic recommendation. Both of the recommendations I read this month from Lexi were great, so this one was a lot of fun to read, and I am excited to read it again. Not read it again. I'm excited to continue the series. I don't know when I will continue the series, but probably later this year I'll finish that series out, since Everand, which is what Scribd used to be called, they have it. So if you don't know, it is about about cryptids and black markets and taking people apart and being sold on a black market and stuff and things. And it's morbid and I enjoyed it a lot, you know? That's all I got. Next up is a nonfiction book. Actually, I'm really surprised to have a nonfiction book as one of the top books that I read this month, but that is going to be What My Bones Know by Stephanie Fu. This is a book that talks about complex PTSD, which is something that I have, and this is me saying it in like the most simple of terms. PTSD happens from a singular event wherein your brain knows that this is not the norm, but it was still traumatizing, versus complex PTSD, where it's something that happens so frequently that you assume this is the norm. Your brain rewires to go, okay, this behavior is to be expected and we should be prepared for it happening at any time. Just in case you wondered. It happens a lot of the time with abuse victims, and specifically victims of abuse in childhood or teenagerdom, either from family or from romantic partners. Whatever. Anyway. I just needed to clarify what that is. What My Bones Know, I read it in one day, which I super didn't expect. I had it spaced out and planned and whatever. I was sobbing reading this book. There were many times that I was just crying, and both in feeling so seen and also so devastated for this person having gone through this. And also the happy moments are, nobody understands how important those moments are, and having a partner who can care for you even as you're figuring out recovery and therapy through complex PTSD. It is one of the most difficult things I feel like I've had to address in therapy, is my complex PTSD, and that directly affects your loved ones around you, like how you react to things, and as you uncover things in therapy, it's really difficult, and this book really encompassed that. I think that the way that Stephanie Fu really tied in both storytelling and factual information about complex PTSD and the studies done and how it's diagnosed, recognizing what privilege she does and did not have, all of those things. I felt like it was really well done in a way that such a heavy book didn't feel so heavy. It didn't feel like my burden to carry for someone else, if that makes sense. There are times where some nonfiction books feel like they become a burden that I have to start carrying just to finish the book, and this didn't do that. I think it's an incredible book, and I think that if you or somebody that you know has complex PTSD, you should read it. Even if you don't, but it is very heavy. Obviously, the content is very heavy, but it's truly. I usually don't talk this much about a book that I really enjoyed, but this one just like moved me in such a deep emotional way. I was raw, and admittedly I was in a state of like a triggered state a little bit at the end, just because it was so much raw emotion, and that is so much not something that I very much have to turn off a lot of the time to deal with some of my own trauma responses to things, and so even I will say that there's a little bit of like, I would recommend taking breaks when you read it, and don't just read it in one day like I did. So that is my top books of this month. I am going to go ahead and tell you about the worst book of the month, and let me first tell you why I'm so disappointed that it's the worst book of the month. It is because it was on my 2024 releases list. Like, I was very excited about this book coming out. I thought it sounded really good. It had a lot of like older horror vibes, like the 60s vibes, where they a lot of the time would talk about apartment complexes or hotels in that creepy kind of way that those places really do kind of feel, especially like at night, I thought this had such good potential, but then it it fucking fell flat, and that is going to be The Marigold by Andrew F. Sullivan. This book does talk about hotels that are cursed, essentially, and then this hole in the ground that has this secret other world, and I didn't... Listen, by the end of the book, yes, I know why it all tied together, but also it didn't need to. There was just... If I had to hear about one more man getting off alone, I was gonna lose my mind. I think that is unnecessary in horror. I think the hypersexualization in horror, like that kind of hypersexualization, and I'm not talking about sex in horror. I don't mind sex in horror books. That part I have no problem with. I'm talking about every single chapter talking about sexual context, having sexual content that's completely unnecessary to the plot or the story or any of that. I find that very, very frustrating to read as somebody who's... I'm uncomfortable with those topics, but I also don't go into horror books expecting to have to read that all the time. Unless I'm reading an older horror book, then I expect it. I expect misogyny, I expect overt hypersexualization for seemingly no fucking reason, women to be slightly degraded. Like, I expect all of that. I don't expect that in a book that I'm reading in 2024. Unfortunately, that is exactly what I got with this. Not necessarily the misogyny and that kind of thing, but the hypersexualization was such a jarring... It literally had so little to do with the plot that it took me out of the plot every single time, that it was disruptive to the reading experience and made me not care about the plot. Because I was like, you don't clearly care about your plot. You'd rather write about these stories about these people that you dislike. Like, that's the gist of it to me. I usually, because I've got a couple of other people that use my library card with me, usually I'm like, hey, this horror book was okay. It was good to pass the time. If you want it, I'll leave it and you can read it. No, this one I returned immediately as I finished it. I returned it, and then I told Ozzy and Art, and I was like, don't read this. Do not read it. I'm returning it, so you can't read it because it was bad. And I don't think you should read it. The horror aspect wasn't even worth it. The plot wasn't worth it. Like, sometimes, for me, a plot line or a horror aspect is so good that it's worth the parts that make me uncomfortable. It's worth the discomfort of concepts that I don't enjoy in books. It's even sometimes worth, like, unlikable characters or badly written dialogue. Like, it's sometimes I can get past those things. But unfortunately, the plot and the horror aspects were not... They were a 3-star read on their own, and then when you add those things that I don't like in a book on top of it, it just brought it down to a 1-star read for me. So I really did not enjoy this book, and I'm so mad about it because it genuinely was one I was excited for, and here we are. I didn't get to enjoy it. So that is it, though. That is the wrap up. We've got my stats, we got my top and bottom books. That's it. I'm excited for next month. I think it'll be really interesting. So the wrap up to that could be a fun time. If you have read any of the books that I've talked about or are interested in reading the books that I just talked about, let me know in the comments down below. Did you read The Marigold and did you enjoy it? What are your bases for reading horror or for rating things that have things that you generally don't like in books but like the plot is interesting? Like, what are your thoughts on that as well? I'm always interested in hearing about how other people rate their books, like the conversation of like, if you dislike a book, do you publicly rate it low or not? And yes, I personally do because my review is for me. I'm gonna be honest in my reviews. Reviews are not for authors. They're for readers, and if I disliked something, then I want to dissuade others from reading it. Even if it's something that I read and found, you know, this book wasn't for me, I will put that in the first line of my review. Hey, admittedly, this book may not have been for me. And here's all the reasons why, right? Like, I'll include that in my review, but I don't know. I'm curious. I find those conversations interesting, as long as we're all polite about it and understand that reviews at the end of the day are subjective, right? So don't try to change anybody's opinion. We're listening politely here. That's it though. That is my video. I post videos every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and share. And if you didn't enjoy this video, let me know how I can make it better for you, or don't, and continue on your merry way. Yeah, that's it. Don't forget to take your meds, drink your water, and do something today to take care of yourselves. Okay, thanks, bye.